This might be for life. Yeah. This might be for life. Stand up when the chief is here. Hands up. Yeah, the chief is here. Stand up when the chief is here. Hands up. Yeah, the chief is here. Yeah, this might be for life.
Good afternoon, all my dear Smutbies, and welcome to this amazing webinar. We have with us John Sanei, who's a futurist. And the question I want to ask him, so firstly, welcome, John. And John is in Clifton at the moment. He was up near Sanei, where he got caught by the COVID, the pandemic. He was stuck in South Africa. He's often in London or overseas, but he ended up in Clifton, so that's not too bad, whereas I'm in outer space. So John, welcome. And the first question I want to ask is, what is a futurist?
Well, thank you so much. Really great to be chatting to you guys. Look, the future can be dissected and sort of categorized any way you want to, because people have got variations of skills of doing it. For me, it's about categorizing and contextualizing the future in a way that gives decision makers more courage to make decisions about the future that they're not really comfortable with. So for me, all futures are based on the macro trends of human need states and expectations that are changing around the world. And so you can quite simply see that most humans are after hyper-personalization, hyper-seamlessness, and hyper-trust. When you start combining these three need states, you have a very broad section of understanding the future. And then you obviously start dissecting it into finer and finer details, depending on if you're working in mining or finance or fashion. But the broad strokes is always dealing with human beings. And these human beings have very similar need states. And this is how trends are actually created.
So, by the way, I didn't prepare for this webinar. I told John I wasn't going to read anything or look at anything. So if you're feeling slightly confused, you're in the same position as me. So John, say those three things again. And can you describe each of them and explain what they are?
Sure. So before I do that, let me tell you that there's three markets in the world that we look at, like three mega markets. You have the mature awareness market, the emerging market, and the less affluent market. You have pockets of these markets all around the world, no matter what city you're in. So you have the slums of India that are very similar to the townships in South Africa. You have the vegan cafes in San Francisco and Berlin that are very similar to the ones in Cape Town. And the shopping centers in Dubai and Beijing are very similar to each other. So you have these pockets, and each one has a mega trend that underpins it. The first one is mature awareness market, which is underpinned by a mega trend called guilt-free consumption. Everything that's happened in this market is about what impact am I having on the world. And these people have money. They're about 20 to 30% of the human population. Then you have the emerging markets, which are underpinned by conspicuous consumption. Just one generation ago, these markets didn't have money. Now they have lots of money, so they need to show as many people that they have this money. The way they express their wealth is in a very specific way. And then the less affluent market is underpinned by value-driven consumption, wanting to share, expand or stretch their pesos or their dollar as far as they can. What you have are these three big markets, but underpinning all of this are the human need states around the need for hyper-seamlessness. In other words, we want to work with brands that make it as easy as possible for us to work with them. A great example is Amazon. And some of their pockets, what they have started doing is sending you two boxes. One box with the things they think you want, and the one box which is empty, which you put the things you don't want into the empty box and send it back. The things that they think you want is obviously preempted by what you've bought already, utilizing machine learning and data points. And so what happens, they've had up to a 72% hit rate of people accepting what's been suggested to them and putting only the rest of the stuff and being sent back. And all of this is for free. Another example of this is Spotify. Spotify understand this concept of curate, match, and facilitate. They're able to curate music, match it to you personally, and facilitate to you for $5 a month. That is the future, I would imagine, of many different types of businesses where we don't have to think about the decisions that are made intelligently around us. So that's hyper-personalization and hyper-convenience all in one go. Even if you think about the world's worst pizza, but the fastest growing pizza brand in the world, Domino's Pizza, which is just really disgusting. But they're one of the biggest growing pizza brands in the world. Why? Because they understand that the minute you want a pizza, you want a pizza. You often are drunk or high, and maybe that's not even the point that you want a quality pizza, you just want a pizza. And then finally, trust. We are inundated with brands and people trying to sell us stuff online. And the way we want to actually work with brands are brands that are not selling to us, but building trust with us. And so you see brands that have got this longer term focus that want to just build trust amongst its fan base, and that fan base then becomes your marketing ploy. You can see it with Tesla. Tesla has now launched, last year sometime, launched their own taxi hailing app. I don't know if you saw it, but they were going straight up against Lyft and Uber. And they said, look, by 2020, I mean, obviously this was pre-COVID, but they were saying that at the end of 2020, their own app will start working now. And people were like, are you mad? How are you going to compete with so many cars on the road with Uber and Lyft? And he said, well, look, by the time the legislation changes, everybody that owns an Uber, a Tesla will have a self-driving taxi. And you'll be able to put your car into the loop, and while you're at the office or at home in the restaurant, your car can be driving around making you money. But here's the magic, and this is how he builds trust. The average price charged by Uber or Lyft is between $2 and $3 a mile, depending on fluctuations. Tesla will charge 18 cents a mile. Why? Because he doesn't need to charge more. Now, if he wasn't building trust and he was being a crude or shrewd businessman, he would be going at $1.50. But he's like, move it all out the way. Let's disrupt this business model. Let's build incredible levels of trust. When you buy a Tesla, you can get it paid off by putting it in the taxi loop, and a consumer is only paying 18 cents. So you can see this in big businesses that we love. They've hyper-personalized it, hyper-seamless, and hyper-trust.
So there must be some companies that are making every mistake in the book, are being left behind, and we won't see in the FTSE 100 or even the FTSE 1000 in 5 years' time. Give us some examples of them.
Well, I don't know about specific examples, but I can tell you that industries that are closed loops where nobody is able to see the lack of transparency, the lack of trust, the understanding that profit over everything else is by far the most important thing. The only person that enjoys that is your shareholders. It's the only person. Your employees don't enjoy that. Your consumers don't enjoy that. The environment doesn't enjoy that. And so the old boys club that was formed many decades ago on this concept of the doctrine of growth over everything else at the expense of employees' health, environment, and anything else that comes through it, that is a concept. The legacy business models of linear profit over anything else, I think those are dying, because what I see in my own habits and in many habits around us is the ability for us to trust and follow a mission, be part of a brand that helps us live our values. And in that place, price becomes secondary. Look at Patagonia. Patagonia drives this concept, and they're not cheap. And they're not trying to be cheap, they're trying to be fair. And I think that as consumers that have got the privilege of understanding this concept of the domino effect of your consumer or purchasing impact, you start seeing brands that are winning because of this transparency. So any business that's rigid, any business that's only focused on profit, we're starting to see slow down and really start to have less people following it and chasing it.
I mean, there's Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
Right up at the top is self-actualization. But there's also a huge amount of homogenization going on in the world. You know, people of a certain, of the mature or the,
Emerging and less
emerging.
eminent. Yeah.
You know, everyone's got Patagonia, everyone's got the Tesla, everyone's using Amazon. You know, where does individuality come in? You know, when you look at pieces of art that have been replicated, you're buying number 5 of 30. You're going to get back to 1 of 1. Where's individuality in the story?
Well, look, I think it's changing. What individuality is and how you come about it is all changing. And before I answer your question, I'm glad you brought up the Maslow hierarchy of needs, because what we have to realize is that the Maslow hierarchy of needs was turned upside down because of COVID. We went from the striving for self-actualization to, am I going to survive this? Is my emotional health in a good place? Am I physiologically safe as my home? And are my family around me? And we realize that the future of consumption is going to be very much based on this inversion of the Maslow hierarchy of needs, the process of luxury, or move from a destination purchase to a journey purchase of emotional well-being, financial well-being, and physical well-being. Just like the war change the buying habits of the baby boomers, our buying habits will start to change. As far as individuality is concerned, I've got to be honest with you, and I've always been an early adopter, and this is why it's so comfortable for me to be a trend specialist, and I never really call myself a futurist, but somebody who helps other people see the future, is about minimizing the fluff that got us to stand out, and to really start to accentuate the individuality in our uniqueness and our authenticity and what value we bring to the world. You know, in the 14th century, what we had was the Black Death that devastated most of Europe. That devastation saw the end of feudalism. It saw the growth of technical knowledge and agricultural knowledge that really became more widespread, and the beginning and the birth of the Italian Renaissance. The first time we started to really celebrate knowledge, beauty, and art. And now what we have right now is the end and the death of the surplus society, moving into the celebration of human uniqueness, human beauty, and human knowledge. And so what I think individuality is going to be reshaped, but become your most important currency as we start into this, moving into this new world.
The issue here, though, is all the examples you've given us, the bubonic plague, the move to the Renaissance world. You know, there's a political upheaval in addition to the economic upheaval. And, you know, are we seeing a huge political upheaval here? Is this our first taste of forced socialism? Or is it something more altruistic? Or is it more inclusive? Or, you know,
I mean, I think it's
country by country.
Look, I think it's a great question. I think very clearly the COVID has brought about anything that was dormant and sleeping to the surface. And I'm talking even in our own personal capacities. If you were anxious before COVID, you have many more opportunities and reasons to be anxious now. And if you are having an issue in your relationships, they're all coming to the surface now. And if your business was kind of teetering on the end, it's fallen over.
Yeah.
And so right across the board, we see a socio-economic, political, countrywide, community-wide, personal-wide, all these things really coming to the surface. I think the real trick is for us to understand that nobody can tell us what's coming. And that's become the thing that I've been saying. And the book that I'm writing right now is called Future Next. And the payoff line is conquering uncertainty. It's because it's just uncertain. And so we have to realize that we're moving from a complicated world to a complex one. And a complicated world is patterns that repeat themselves, and a complex one is patterns that don't repeat themselves. So you can't mathematically find your way into the future and thrive. That's not going to work, because you can't utilize automation and design thinking and mathematics, which you used to do for the last 150 years, extrapolating your past into the future, bringing about more efficiencies. That's gone, because it doesn't matter how efficient you are, you could be gone tomorrow. You know, the efficiency means nothing now. So complexity is what we need to be preparing for, and complexity is going to be impacting everything, from politics to ourselves to work to consumerism, you name it. You know?
So there were a lot of trends that were underway anyway. You know, remote learning, using Zoom instead of flying all over the place. You know, these trends were happening, and this is massively, you know, home delivery massively accelerated them. What are a couple of trends that people haven't noticed, that are happening, that you've seen, that are actually happening, that are not obvious? Do you have a few?
I haven't really given that much thought. The thing that I always speak about is not trends specifically, because what I usually do is I break down those markets and we work within those markets, because the trends inside an emerging market and the trends inside a mature awareness market are totally different. They're actually, in fact, maybe total opposite trends, you know? But what I do think that we need to realize is that preparation for businesses needs to be different in order to be prepared for the future. And what I mean by this is, what I've been advising businesses is that you need two teams running in parallel to each other, working on keeping the lights on and planting seeds for the future. They're very different personality traits, very different thinking, in fact, differently measured in how successful they are. Because this is about efficiency and profitability, which we're so used to. But this is about experimentation and trying things out. And so that's really the biggest trend I can tell you is the restructuring and the re-understanding of the future of leadership and how it's not about a principle discussion, but a philosophical one. And this is the thing that I'm pushing a lot, because for me, I work a lot with leaders around the world and trying to get them to understand that they don't need to be schizophrenic, because I think many leaders are schizophrenic today because what they're trying to do is keep the old world going while building a new business based on a new business model, which is just warping their minds. They're not doing either one of them well. So for me, the biggest trend is to understand when to step back, where your capabilities are, who you need to hire, and how you start planning for the future, because it's totally different to the past.
You know, the interesting thing, being at home 24 hours a day, effectively, you know, gives you so many more hours of productivity. You know, firstly, you're not eating out as much, probably not drinking as much. I certainly haven't been. And you have more hours in the day. So you can actually be hugely productive in what you're doing, but you can also make sure that what your mainstream income covers your costs and you're in good shape. And then you have extra time to try new things, moonlight with another company, be a consultant, write the book, you know, do the Netflix series, create that optionality. So you've got your costs covered at the baseline and you're working for the options. And people have, you know, offered, I'm working on a whole bunch of things, but a number of people have offered spare time to work on things with me in addition to their day job, because they got more time.
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't think you had a productivity problem at any time in your life, Rob. Yes, you've got even more time to cram it all in. But one of the things that I've been trying to get people to understand is that we're in a deep, deep transformation. And transformation, if you think about the word, it's really broken up into three words. Trans, as in transition, for, as in forward, mation, as in motion. So transition, forward, and motion is happening at hyper pace right now. What we've got to realize is that because we're in the middle of this transition phase, and now transition phase has got three sections. It's got the goodbye, which is always tough and always unhappy or irritable because you're leaving everything that you knew and were familiar with. Second is no man's land, where nothing's familiar, everything's new, nothing's like it used to be. And then third is momentum and moving up and picking up again. The way we measure success in the time of transformation must change, because success is about relearning, learning new things, connecting new dots, understanding new principles, new philosophies. And so we can't measure and look for success like we used to. We've got to now redesign it and rethink it. And I loved what you said there, because it's about being minimalist in a time of transformation. It's about holding, watching, rethinking, and then moving. And so I think people, when they're measuring themselves to the old way, they find themselves upset. And just about changing the constructs of how they measure success can be a big difference.
So funny, but 10 years ago, my wife minimalized me. We were moving houses in London, and she said, "Why are we taking 1,000 books in cases to our new house and you never read them?" And I go, "But I love my books." She goes, "You can't love 1,000 books. Come on." To cut a long story short, she made me choose categories and she got rid of some. As of today, I've been a minimalist for 10 years. I only wear blue and white.
Yeah.
I've given away all my watches or sold them. I don't collect anything.
Yeah.
People have been to my house. It's beautiful, open air, you know. Yeah. But there's nothing no possession that I care about. I don't care about cars, watches, jewelry. She never wanted an engagement ring, wedding ring. I am a minimalist. Wow. And I've gone further than she has. I actually hate buying things.
Yeah.
She says your clothes are falling apart. Go get a new shirt. But it really freed me up.
Well,
I had to simplify my business life too. It's been the greatest thing being a minimalist.
Yeah, look, I call myself a luxury minimalist. In other words, I prioritize 5 things and I spend the maximum amount of money on those 5 things. And then that's it. I have nothing else.
So I have 3 things. Mine are money in the bank, houses, and great experiences. What are your 5?
Well, mine are no physical assets. That's for me. I don't want anything holding me down. But then again, Rob, I don't have kids and I don't have a wife. And I imagine that would change instantaneously if I did have something like that. So my 5 are tech. So I always have the best tech, the latest tech, because I'm working in the space, you know. The best food. So I always have somebody prepping food for me or making sure that I've got the right type of food here. The third thing is training. I always prioritize my training and as far as where I'm training and what I'm training. The 4th thing is travel. So I want to travel in as much luxury as I can. And then the fifth is experiences, just like you. So it's really about that mix of being as healthy as possible in my emotional state, my physical state, and my mental state. And that for me is luxury more than anything else.
You know, somebody said once a fantastic thing, and it's just come back to me. I haven't actually thought about it for years. And they said, I've just remembered it. They said, the problem with the world we live in today is we have emotions from the dinosaur era.
Yes.
You know, the girl's boobs, you get a hard on. I mean, it's ridiculous, really. Fantastic. Yes. It's ridiculous. So emotions from the primeval era. We have regulation from the Middle Ages that hasn't really expanded that much. And we have technology from the gods. Those three, you know, they're extraordinary conflict. You know, they're
big time. Big time. Yeah, well, look, I think many of us are instinctual still in our caveman wants and needs. And really this idea of self-actualization, of moving that energy. I mean, Tantra teaches this to you, moving your energy from your base into your heart. So that evolvement is obviously a very, very big part of it. And, you know, when I first started speaking and writing, I was speaking a lot about the future, categorizing and contextualizing it. But I would go back to many organizations I spoke at and nothing had changed. And the real thing, and the reason I focus so much on psychology now is that if leaders don't have the right psychology, you can talk about the future till the cows come home. Nothing changes. And so it's this self-actualization, this evolving into a more mature version of ourselves that makes us naturally collaborative, naturally creative, naturally part of the future rather than stuck in the past. You know, there's a great saying from Dr. Joe Dispenza. He says, are you living a life based on a set of memories from your past? Or are you living a life based on the vision of your future? And most people are in repetition and they don't even realize it. And those are the cavemen, you know, and when we need to self-actualize and get out of that. And so that's a big part of my work, to try and get people to understand that it's easy. You don't have to be a lentil eating, sandal wearing hippie to want to move into the space of higher consciousness, which makes you actually more profitable in the long run, which is also a bit of a dichotomy, because what you just said now is you make all this and you need less. So it's like, I don't actually need much.
Yeah. But I love it. It frees your brain. It really does.
Yeah.
We've got an interesting question from Olivia Vaughan. And then I want to make a comment before you answer it. But do you have an opinion if the grind of 8 to 5 jobs will fall away and be more focused on human knowledge, utilizing tech in automation? So this big shift towards AI and robotics, I encourage and I welcome it. A lot of people fear it because they say there's going to be a huge dislocation. Anyone who's doing scrubbing and cleaning and lifting and picking jobs are in serious trouble. Anything that can be automated. But my view is that, you know, everything expands massively, the economy, as opposed to sort of just one-to-one kill-offs. So my feeling is that there is a world, maybe not too far ahead, where people have a lot more free time, where all people have a lot more free time. So, you know, in
I mean,
the British, when they had the Industrial Revolution in Britain 200 years ago, and the big manufacturing out of Liverpool and Manchester, that's when rugby, cricket, all the sports were created because people had free time. What do we do with it?
Right.
So I'm positive about the future. Sorry.
Look, when I read up on you, I could definitely see you very positive about the future. And now you exude that energy. Look, I think it's a good question. And I think what we have to realize is if you zoom out, and that's the key here, you got to zoom out to be able to understand that we are working less than we've ever worked before. You might not think it, but if you go back 100 years, people were working 15-hour days on either in agriculture or in factories. So
6 days a week.
Yeah, 6 days a week, exactly.
Yeah.
So we're already working much less than before and having a better life than before. So we mustn't just focus on the right now and here. Let's actually zoom out. The second thing is realize that we're also moving into a world called the zero marginal cost society, where we move away from a scarcity mindset to a digital abundant mindset. If you just start with communication, just as one example, here we are, all of us on Zoom, costing us almost nothing, really. And you've been on Zoom all day and WhatsApp's nothing. Communication's already kind of free on the side. You then look at education and look how it's being disrupted right now. Look at entertainment. And then we'll start seeing energy. And then we'll start seeing transportation. And then it will just...
Food. And then food.
Food. And so you understand that it's not about working less. It's about understanding that we are given more for less effort, actually. And so this big transition that we're going through is moving us from this linear analog world to a multi-adaptive digital world. And so we'll start moving into a place where you won't need as much, but you'll start working not for survival, but as an expression of what value you want to add to the world. You know, I often say what you want to do is you want to follow your curiosity to a point where you lose time. And when you start losing,
say that again.
Follow your curiosity till you start losing time. Because when you lose time, now you're doing what you're here on earth to do. Because your genius comes alive and then time disappears. As Mark Twain said, the two most important days of your life are when you're born and when you find out why. And when you find out why, you're not working. And so what's happened is that education has forced us into thinking in certain ways, playing certain roles that fit into the production line of the Industrial Revolution. They are called a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, accountant, blah, blah, blah. What's happened now is that there's millions of these people, very smart, all with great intention, but now you commoditize because you're in a surplus world. So now you go on, Rob.
I have to dive in now.
Go ahead.
My wife did her 8 years as a doctor in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Became a doctor, spent 4 or 5 years as a doctor, and then I met her and disrupted her life, and she's now an entrepreneur in the medical publishing business. Kiwi Kate. But I asked her the other day, I said, you know, there's Dr. Watson, this computer that handles legal issues. I said, of your 8 years or 6 years of hard training as a doctor, how many of those were rote learning?
Yeah.
And she said, 66% of it.
Yeah.
So I said, you mean all of that, you could have done basically medicine in 3 years?
Yeah.
If you had a computer with all the data.
Yeah.
And she said, yes. So doctors, you know, GPs are going to become redundant. Pointless going to GP. You'll just have all your vital statistics and you'll go to a specialist.
Yeah.
Lawyers, same thing.
Yeah.
80% of what they do is just press a button and print it out. You know, they pretend that they can improve on it. They can't.
Yeah.
Maybe it's those, and the question comes in here. It says, what is your advice to post C19 employees be specialists in certain areas like we have now, all need to be jack of all trades? And if you think about, you know, maybe engineering is still out there, something to do, but law, medicine, accounting.
Yeah. Lots are being disrupted. Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think it's a good question. Sorry, the sun obviously is now coming in.
We've lost the sun this side of the mountain.
Okay, so it's here. I've got it here for you. Look, I think I've written about this quite extensively in my last book around how to prepare for the future. And so the first thing I always say is the world in the future will celebrate your uniqueness over your surplus skill sets. And the reason that the world will do that is because most of the surplus skill sets will be automated utilizing data and machine learning, just like Rob said. So that's obvious. I mean, we can see that coming. The thing that is not going to be disrupted is your uniqueness in the way you connect the subjects that you are interested in. Now, for me, go on, Rob.
Keep going, because how do you know when? Because I only found out 10 years ago that I was the best salesman, public speaker in the world. 10 years ago. And I'm 60 this year.
Well, look, I think the thing is also, Rob, you're obviously very ambitious, very articulate, and very intelligent. And so what you did was follow the constructs of what society, education, and family told you to do. Go get an education, go get a job, follow and chase that dollar and keep going. Because in your world of that generation, that was success. In today's world, it's about saying, look, you don't want to strive for accomplishment, because what accomplishment does, it gets you to a place where you think you're going to be successful, but you're still miserable. Because you can have all the cars and the money, and you can have an affair, a drug addict, an alcoholic. You're just not in a good place. So what's the point? What we need to be striving for is purpose. And purpose is brought about through curiosity. And so the example I always give is, look, my example is I've become well known globally. I've never been to university. I've not followed a normal path, but I am incredibly fascinated with human psychology, neuroscience, and the future. Do you know who else is? Nobody. I've never met anybody that combines those topics. So when I get called to do a keynote or to go and do a strategy session with an organization, it's unique. They're totally surprised. They have no idea what's coming at them, and that's what's celebrated. So 8 to 5, try and get out as quickly as possible. The future of employment, I believe we're moving into the era called the future forced entrepreneurship. We're moving into an era where no organization can guarantee you employment for an extended period of time. Nobody can.
So true. So I have two sons. One's 23, one's 20. And the 23-year-old got into Georgetown, did business. And towards the end of his Georgetown career, he said, Dad, I haven't really got myself positioned for a job. I might need a bit of help. So I thought, look, this will be the first and only time in your life you'll work for a big American corporate is straight out of university. You'll probably never do it again. So, I helped him get a few interviews, and he got a job with Amgen. Amgen's one of the top 4 pharma companies in the world in Los Angeles. And he went in there in the junior training program, and he spent his first 6 months in audit, and he hated it. He hated hated going in, hated what he did. And he just hated it. And I kept thinking, you've got to stick it out like I did and power through. And he called me one day and said, Dad, I'll take any punishment in the world, but let me loose. I got to just allow me to do my own thing.
Yeah.
3 weeks later, COVID hit. And I was like, he had a job. Now he doesn't. He's found a job. I can't say what it is because he signed an NDA anyway, whatever. It's in LA and it's with a very famous entrepreneur. You know who it is. And he couldn't be happier, minimum wage.
Wow.
But my father's era, if you didn't go to Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, and Yale, you couldn't get into certain jobs.
Yeah.
The funnel got narrow.
Yeah.
My era, there were 25 universities, and you really wanted to be Goldman Sachs and McKinsey. Those were the prizes.
Yeah.
Today, 4 years ago, hundreds of universities, doesn't matter which country you come from, and you didn't have to go to Goldman Sachs and McKinsey. There are hundreds of opportunities. As of now, I doubt I'm going to encourage either of my sons to do an MBA. I did a Harvard MBA.
Yeah.
I would just say, don't bother. Do not bother. Yeah. You can learn the key bits online. You can work with inspiring people. You'll learn quicker, faster, better.
I was on a debate show with a professor in Dubai, and he was all for the MBA, and I was like, no, I don't think the MBA is going to, unless you change the MBA drastically. I think the way it's based on is based on case studies. You're going through case studies of businesses that were successful. Where's the teaching about what's going to be successful? And so I'm a big proponent of the best training is in a fast-paced, pivoting tech startup. Because
I agree.
Yeah.
And if it fails in 2 years, you do the next one and the next one.
Yeah.
And and then
one of them will hit. Exactly. One of them will hit.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So the practice of adaptability, the practice of agility, the practice of being okay with being shifting and moving around is the skill set of the future. It's not about being linear. It's not about studying once and then moving,
Do you know, John, if you look at my career, I did 2 years at Goldman, 2 years at Harvard Business School, 2.5 years with Rupert Murdoch. I basically, in 12 different lives. Okay. And I think it's the best thing ever.
Yeah.
The best thing ever. So what I used to advise my sons 5 years ago was, when you get out of university, you either work for a big company that's going to train you.
Yeah.
Or you pick one of the most inspiring people on the planet and go work for them. But don't work for their company. Work for them. I worked as Murdoch's right-hand man. Carried his, wrote his speeches. We're in the cab with him. I mean, unbelievable. Extraordinary.
Yeah. Wow.
And that was my advice to my kids. Today, it's different. It's work for the most inspiring person in the world. That stays the same. So if you work for, Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, whomever you think is an extraordinary animal, but you've got to work on their hip. But the go join a big business that'll train you is gone. It's now go join a wild ass startup.
Yeah.
It fails, just do the next one and the next one.
Yeah, exactly.
Agreed?
I just want to touch on the one part of the question I'm reading here. It says, need to be a jack of all trades. And I think it's important to touch on that because recently a book came out, which became a New York Times bestseller called Range. And it's talking about the world that requires generalists to be able to become successful in a range of different skill sets to be able to bring in their focus. And this is exactly the opposite to Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hour rule. And on the front of the page, on the front of the book, it's got Malcolm Gladwell quoting, saying, "I love learning new things and being proven wrong." And it shows you that before the 10,000 hour rule was perfect because you needed that. This new world you're moving into, you need a range. So you need as many different ways to come at a subject as possible.
Interesting you say that. My father, and I was just going to look it up because I've forgotten the name. My father's 93.
Wow.
And still flying airplanes. I mean, he is ridiculous.
Wow.
And every time that I was on the leading edge working with Murdoch, we'd be working on the future, cars with navigation systems in 1991.
Wow. Okay.
And I'd tell my dad, I'd tell him about all these extraordinary things. He'd go, yeah, I read that in 1950. Who's the great science fiction writer from the 40s and 50s?
Alon Toffler?
No, one more, almost there.
I don't know any others.
Anyway, my dad was like, eh?
Popcorn, Faith Popcorn?
No, in the 1950s.
Yeah, no, I don't know 50s.
Okay, I'll look it up, but he's too funny, author. He just says, yeah, I've read about that before. I've seen that. The future, got that. Isaac Asimov.
Okay, yes, I've heard that name before. I haven't read any of his stuff.
So my dad, got all these books on a library was filled with science fiction, and he's cool. It's like nothing new to him.
Yeah. Look, again, you have these trajectories that you can kind of see what's going to happen in long term. So I mean, obviously, these guys had the skill set of really extrapolating their scenario planning. It's not a skill I have, to be honest. It's not something that really I can't see way into the future. But, some of these people are really gifted with that sort of thing. That's why I said I don't like being called a futurist. And also there's so many different ways to categorize and contextualize the future. It's just really about how do you find it and how do you prepare for it,
So when I was working for Murdoch, 89 to 92, we wrote speeches to say, the BBC can't survive. They can't, we need to have a multi-channel future. And Murdoch made speeches about the Berlin Wall will come down because the people on the East are going to want the choice that they see in the West.
Yeah.
And the totalitarian regimes cannot fight MTV. That was kind of the message,
Okay, I like
so
that.
we see America in crisis. We see Western civilization on the slide. And we see the Chinese emerging. And the Chinese are, capitalists in a communist world. And we fear that society. My view is that it'll collapse under its own weight because the individuals in China are going to want the same things that John and Rob and the Americans want. They're going to want to be able to be free and creative and determine their own future. So I don't fear an authoritarian regime, maybe in the short term, but not in the long term.
Rob, I want to agree with you 100% because it feels good too, except I saw an interview from a very high-end Chinese person saying they think it's fine being tracked everywhere they go because in their world, that's just normal. And it made me realize that we are so shocked by this tracking there. It's kind of, that's it. I've just always been brought up in it. And I think we got to, go on.
But why do we fear it? Because in Britain, they were going to launch this ID card and everyone said, no way. My view is that if you've got nothing to hide or you're not guilty, who cares?
I agree with you. I think it's just about not having the freedom. So yes, of course, that is the case. But, in one of my books, I wrote about how powerful narrative and stories are. And you got to realize that, Rob, your narratives and stories, you just explained them. Your dad said Oxford, then you said this, then your son's was this. That's your story and your narrative. So your story and narrative says those Chinese are going to want what I want. I want to agree. Yes, of course, because then we also are free and comfortable to carry on living like we are. But look, we are under massive change. And what we've become used to is this free market that America has created, which, to be honest with you, has done so much good but also it's brought an incredible disparity of people that just don't have a lot and can never break out of that poverty cycle. So yes, we have a much bigger middle class than ever before, but the disparity of wealth is also growing. And there was a great TED talk by a billionaire in the States. He called it "The Pitchforks Are Coming." And he was talking about how, look, you have to open up the market more. You have to make it more fair, because you yourself, as the rich people, are actually sucking all the oxygen out the system, not leaving enough oxygen for other people to want to buy in and create that momentum of growth. So I don't agree with socialism, but I also think that this immature capitalism that we've been following of growth over everything else at the expense of everything else also is a expression of America in this young teenage boy mentality, because America for the longest time is, we are the best. Yes, we can. We'll beat everybody else. That's like a jock in high school, man. We got to be moving towards, let's collaborate, let's uplift, let's bring together, because ultimately, what is the point of some people having and some people not? And so in an age of digital abundance, this shift and this change is essential. Whether it goes the Chinese way or the American way, we form a new type of capitalism, a conscious form of capitalism, which I think is something that I'm driving towards and trying to get more people to want to play into. But yeah, look, I don't know if the Chinese thing will go the way we want it to. I think we want it, but I don't see it. Those guys they're hardcore, man. They're not playing games.
So one of the best TED Talks I ever saw, and I'm embarrassed that I didn't look up the name while you were talking, a Swedish guy, died 3-4 years ago, economist.
Yeah.
And the most amazing TED Talk, I'm going to send it to you. I'm not going to look at
What's his name?
Swedish, died 3-4 years ago, economist.
Swedish guy.
Swedish,
okay.
professor. Yeah. And I know the Swedes on the show will be going, Rob, you can't, shouting the name. But he basically shows empirically that the world today is so much better than the world 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and it's going to be so much better the next 5 years. And he looks at the basics: life expectancy,
yes.
Diseases we got rid of, healthy births, education. The world. That's why I'm an optimist, and I jokingly say that 92.3% of the world are pessimists, because only the paranoid survive. But 6.7% are optimists. Like, today is the best day the world's ever had.
Absolutely.
I might have died of tooth decay 100 years ago. Think about
Absolutely. That. Look, I agree with you. I mean, at Singularity University, we're very big on the fact that we're moving into a better world. And I'm with you. But I think we can make it better. And it's not about wanting more. It's about being more fair. We've come from this place of consumer centricity. And I think we need to move to planet centricity. We need to move into a more long-term, emotionally stable space. Now, look, in 1989, what happened was the Berlin Wall came down. The Exxon Valdez problem happened, which got us to focus on nature. Tiananmen Square happened, which got us to understand that, China started to evolve. The World Wide Web was created. And something very, very important happened in 1989, that the world's median age of the Western population tipped 40 for the very first time. And we know, as human beings, we go from me to we. And that was the beginning of us starting to care about nature for the very first time, starting to care about people being suffering from communists and what was going on behind there, accepting people from East Berlin to open them up into this new collaborative world. So the seeds for a more conscious, more mature population, I think, were planted in '89. And now we need to start living it and start to build a new world around this new socioeconomic system. And so the books that I'm writing right now are about how do we go about reimagining, becoming active participants in redesigning the world that we all want to live in, rather than the one that we are stuck in, or an overheated industrial revolution. So for me, I'm just like you, an optimist. I can't help myself. But I heard something new the other day, and might be from the same TED Talk that you spoke about. He called himself a possibilist. He says, I'm not an optimist, I'm a possibilist. I look for possibilities, and I'm always an opportunist. So that's also a nice way to describe it.
If you look at capitalism and socialism, or the continuum, I'm a libertarian, a classical libertarian. The big issue is equality of opportunity.
Yes.
This is equality of result.
Yes.
fundamentally believe in equality of opportunity. If all children get an equal and excellent education,
Yes,
but then they do different things with it.
of
The
course.
result is the result.
Yes,
If I work hard or I'm lucky, good for me. If you
yes.
sit in your ass and do nothing, that's your problem.
Yeah,
You might get lucky. So the socialists and communists just get upset with people having a successful result and want to take it away from them and bring us all down to the lowest common denominator and destroy us. Whereas it's capitalism with a social conscience, which is what I think, or a more mature capitalism, which is what you're saying, everyone would believe in equality of opportunity. Everyone should get the same and correct start. But from then on, the winds change. The winds take you where they take you.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I also think we have to realize that we are redesigning what success looks like.
Hans Rosling.
That's right. I saw it. That's exactly the guy that said possibilist. That's it. That's exactly. I knew you were talking about it. I also couldn't remember his name.
Yeah.
I've never done a webinar at this time, so I didn't know the sun was going to be in my face. So my apologies to everybody watching this.
No, you look well.
Yeah, thank you. But I'm trying to move my way out of the sun, so I'm not like this. But anyway, we are redefining success. And I think that's really important to touch on, because your father's version of success, your version of success, your son's version of success are all ultimately very different. The baby boomers were all about safety and security. The Generation X were all about me and see me. And the millennials are all about flexibility and creativity. Gen Z are much more conscious. And so when I look at, for example, if you had to say you were a minimalist, you yourself right now, 20 years ago, people would go crazy. What do you mean minimalist? There was no such thing. How many more Mercedes-Benzes can you have? And how many more Versace suits can you carry, So we also realize that the future is also dependent on us redesigning what success looks like, so that we are able to have more for more people. We can share more because we don't need to hoard so many Louis Vuitton bags. It becomes ridiculous as a notion,
Funnily enough, Hans Otterling, who's a great friend of mine, Swedish, very famous venture tech investor, did an interview of me, just him and me. And he asked me the question, are you rich? And I answered it by saying, about 15 years ago, somebody asked, how much money do you need in life? And I actually thought about it. And I'll quickly answer the question. As long as you have enough money to eat at a restaurant, breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day, if you want to take as much holiday if you want to educate your children to the nth degree, and to fly long distance on a flatbed, so business or first.
Yes.
That's all you need.
Yeah.
And how much do you need for that? Is probably $25 million US of cash in the bank. Free cash. That's it.
That's rich.
I mean, that's rich. That's all you need. What more do you need? Holidays when you want, eat at restaurants when you want, educate your children to the nth degree.
Sure.
Beautiful house with no more.
That definitely puts you into the 1%. I mean, that's kind of where you're going to be playing, right? But then I would imagine that somebody else that comes from a lower lifestyle than you, rich for them is just having a car and having the home paid off.
And not worrying about rent or food,
So, but I also think that,
Apologies. Olivia Vaughan's question. What are your views on the work of Nikola Tesla and free energy systems? I have no idea, but I have no idea. I can't answer it, so it's you.
Look, I don't either. I just know that we are discovering or rediscovering ancient wisdom, and we are starting to see that many of the old ways of we've been indoctrinated into thinking are fading away, are falling away. And so I hope for all of our sake that his technology is brought back into the mix, and that we are all getting this opportunity to have more by using less. And I think with the digital revolution, the technological transformation we're in, that is already happening. So we're already having much more by using a lot less, than we are dematerializing many things in our lives. The dematerialization of technology, for example, our cell phone has taken 8 or 15 different pieces of equipment and put it into one. That's dematerialization. Communication has been digitized, making it dematerialization. So we are living a lot of Tesla's principles, but in different ways. And I hope that that ideation around power production, utilizing magnets and utilizing torus energy, which is some of the stuff he did, starts becoming more mainstream. But guess what? We have Rob's new boss, Elon Musk, That's, I mean, Rob's son's new boss. I don't know if that's who you meant, but I know you're not allowed to say.
Close.
But, yeah,
Close.
close. Okay. So we've got Elon Musk really playing around with all of this, you know, and lucky us that we've got somebody from the future that's popped into a time machine, came back to help us. And that's what he's doing.
So John, this has been unbelievable. I can go for hours, by the way, on this. I love it. I absolutely, it's like, you know, cleaning your brain and opening it up. How can we help you? Buy your books. What can we do as a community?
Well, thank you so much for having me, and even thank you for asking me the question. One of the things that I'm doing right now is I'm calling, it's part of my new thing. It's called the School of Modern Wisdom. And the School of Modern Wisdom is the combination of ancient wisdom with futurism. What you need to do is you need to have some idea of where you're going and some understanding of your perspective, your memories and your narratives. And when you combine these, you become very masterful in the way you architect your life. And so I'm running these things called Future Preparedness Masterclasses. They run from a Monday to a Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. for an hour a day for 5 days. They're called a sprint strategy session. And what I do is I take my 30 students through a process of perspective management, future of work, future of the consumer, emotional management, and starting with the end in mind, using first principles to design the business or life that you want, utilizing the end in mind, working backwards. So that would be awesome. If you guys want to come and do that sort of workshop with me or masterclass, that'd be awesome. But everything else around what I do in my brand, I write books, I do talks, and I share a lot of vlogs and a lot of videos online just to help my own thinking. I mean, I'm sure, Rob, you've heard the saying, if you want to learn something, read about it. If you want to understand something, write about it. If you want to master something, teach it. And in the process of putting myself up as a teacher of sorts, it helps me distill my thinking and make it much more crisper in my mind. So yeah, join me on social media, join me on my masterclass, buy my books. That'd be great. And hire me for talks and strategy sessions, I guess.
Fantastic. So I'm going to ask you to send me one or two things by email that we can do. And I'd love to do it. But John, thank you so much. And just to finish on a happy note, one of my best friends who's Irish has many, many words of wisdom. He's almost like a poet with his twinkly blue eyes and his moustache. My favorite saying of his is, life is a mystery to be lived, not a problem to be solved. And that resonates with me.
I love that. Jeez, that just calmed me. It's like, I think it's Einstein who said you can live life as if nothing's a miracle or live life as if everything's a miracle. Same thing. Thank you
so much. What a great, great time.
Thank you. Thank you. And
great pleasure, and see you soon. Thank you.
I look forward to it, Rob. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.